I've dealt with the type of inspectors like wrong, 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 wrong. You failed.
Right.
You know?
With no path for correction.
Yeah.
What you're saying.
There always has to be that path for correction.
What is happening, all you amazing pond aficionados and pond super freaks? Welcome to the Pond Digger Podcast. My name is Eric Triplett. I'm your host, and we have a special podcast planned for you tonight. It is about the pond inspection. Today, I have a dear friend of mine, all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada. He's actually a fire inspector out in one of the cities out there, and he's going to be sitting fireside with me, and we're going to be talking about pond inspections and like the whole overall concept of why we should do that on our ponds, when we should do that on our ponds. We're going to throw in some stories about actual inspections and like personal safety, because I touch people's lives with water, and Tyson saves people's lives with water and the intention of water and how to use it. So before we dive into the podcast, I want to share with you, we have two forms of content we share here on the Pond Digger Podcast. Once a week, we try and talk about, basically, if you're a contractor, we want to be the best versions of ourselves. And that's me and my personal journey and my peers and that in my coaching groups that I work with and so forth. And so we're doing a podcast to help us in that area of our life. And the second type of content we share is about touching people's lives with water, like what I'm passionate about, what I've been doing since I was 19 years old, is just sharing those kind of things. And so we're talking from aquariums to water in the garden to permaculture and anything that just like is exciting in the garden. So it all ties to being outdoors in nature, and that's what we're excited about. And so we have our wildlife rehabilitation center here that we do a lot of rehabbing of wild animals and getting back out to the wild. So these are all the fun things that we do at the channel, and I just hope that you'll enjoy it. So from here, we're going to jump onto the podcast with Tyson. We're fireside, and welcome back to the show, Tyson. How are you tonight?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. You know what I want to dive into right away is just the word inspector, for the most part, freaks people out a little bit. Can you like tell us about when you went from a fire sprinkler specialist to being inspector, and how people like took you seriously? Like
Pulling up in your city vehicle, and you get out and you walk up and you're like, "Good morning, I'm Inspector Matthias," and they're like, "Oh, Inspector's here. Put your cigarettes out. Act accordingly." So yeah, it's and they're like, all attention's on you too. Like everything else stops, and they're like, "Oh, the inspector's here. It's business time."
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? What happened? What's wrong?
Put effort around.
It always seems to be like, what's wrong? As soon
Yeah.
as you get out of the truck, they're like waiting for you to tell them what's wrong.
Well, so it's intimidating because, for the most part, like this ties to construction too. So like our listeners that are into construction and stuff like that, I think this is a cool twist to this, is because a lot of contractors are cutting corners and doing shoddy work. I mean, the contractors, a lot of them have a bad rep.
Yeah.
And the inspector's supposed to keep them from being a bad contractor. So there's like this tug of war between that, right? I mean, let's be real.
Yeah, there's like, oh no, what's he gonna find now?
Yeah, what's he gonna make me do over?
Yeah.
But, I mean, being in construction for as long as I have, I've been around contractors that, they don't do great work, right? So it's like, and I'm talking like way back to my framing days. You're supposed to put, 2 nails per stud. They're doing 1 nail and then 2 on the other side so it won't spin. And, it's just like, it saves them time. They're doing piecework. So, it's up to, it was back in the day, the inspector would be like, hey, you need 2 nails here, you need 2 nails here. That's the right way to do it. You need fire blocks, this many on center.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what it's about. First of all, I'm super proud of you for you put a lot of time into throwing wrenches and being an installer. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So you mentioned about sometimes people don't know they're doing something wrong. Like, I'm not saying all contractors are bad. There's a lot of kick-ass contractors, technicians, know how to get stuff done. They're craftsmen. They want it done right. Sometimes they're doing things that they don't know is to code, right?
Yeah, like being an inspector and walking into a project or seeing something that you're there to inspect. If you see something wrong, because it's not right, they don't necessarily know that they're doing something wrong. Not every time that you see something, they might not even know the way they did it was the wrong way. And
what if they're using plans a lot of the times, right? So
there are plans, but there's a lot of it's a wide berth of things that not always are on plans.
Just because it's in the plans doesn't mean it's to code, right?
Yeah.
And okay, so this is an interesting thing to pond design, because we're working with HOAs. I work with a lot of different HOAs, and so when we're designing ponds for people, I know a lot of the codes for those particular backyards, property line setbacks, and things like that in particular, because there's a lot of those places have kind of smaller backyards. They're very close. Like they don't have a big backyard, and you have to have a 5-foot setback from the property line. Sometimes you get a lot of limited space.
Yeah.
And so I remember I did a drawing for one HOA, and they were like, yeah, you can be close to the fence on this side, but not that side. Like all these little nuances, right? But I drew a set of plans for this lady. I'm trying to get the things right. I just want to be real clear on this. When the HOA first got going there, I did a drawing for a couple, submitted it, and we were right next to the property line, because literally there's like 7 foot from that property to the house. There wasn't much space.
Yeah.
So they wanted a little water feature in there. We designed something. I drew it out. We submitted it. I was like, I don't know, it's pretty close to the property line, but like, you only got 7 feet. What are we going to do, right?
Yeah.
So we submitted it. They approved it. We installed it. Everyone's kissing babies, high fives, everything's cool. And then their neighbor wanted one like 6 months later. And I was like, oh, they have some latitude on the property setback on this particular HOA. So I did a drawing for her, and they approved it, but they wanted it set back 5 foot. But I'm like, wait a minute. So the point I'm trying to make is, just because it's on a set of plans doesn't mean it's completely right, because I drew it, and I went through all the paperwork that time, because they didn't even have the paperwork the first time around. That's how new the place was.
Yeah.
They're just like, send it, cool, go ahead and install it. But when I went back on it and I really read through the stuff, I was like, you better go back and double check, because now that I have the regulations, I think the plan that I drew for you that they approved is not going to work.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to go back and talk to them. Otherwise, I might build it and they might have to take it out.
Yeah.
So that was like that validates and verifies that not everything is on the plans is necessarily to code and to specs and all that stuff.
It might be drawn to a plan, and you go out there and you install it differently, and then you do an as-built.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
You resubmit it, and then that gets approved too. So that plan is just like a guideline in which you navigate, but you can step away from that plan and still do it a different way, and it still be correct as well.
Yeah.
There just wouldn't be any documentation of it being done that way, because the plan was changed or altered.
Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure that the audience realizes, like, this is just a foundation of what we're kind of setting up here.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the HOA is an important factor there. But a lot of times, a part of your business is, or what you do for the city is, you go and inspect buildings as they're being constructed. Am I doing it right? But there's also, you go and inspect occupancy of businesses and make sure that everything is safe.
Yes.
Right? So that's the type of pond inspection that I really want people to understand, because we do DIY pond inspections. Like, we help the people, they want a pond kit, and they buy everything from us, and then we help them along. And they send us pictures. We're like, oh, yeah, that's good. And, oh, this could be a problem. We help them like that. All across the country, Florida, whatever. Florida, East Coast, West Coast. But I think it's really important for every owner, even if they're a pretty good pond owner, that is, even if they're a pretty good hobbyist and they're pretty sharp, I think it's smart to have a professional inspect that pond annually.
Yeah.
Just to make sure it's not getting out of line.
Yeah.
Because then that's what you do. You do a lot of that stuff. You have the occupancies already there. You go in and inspect the building. So share a little bit of stuff about that, and then we'll bring it back to ponds and stuff.
Well, things change. You might inspect it. It was done per plan. Everything's good. You sign that. You move in. They're doing business. 2 years go by. They build an addition, or they extend the side of the building, or they build a wall here. They want to have more office space. Or I don't want that office anymore. I'm going to demo that side of my office and I'm going to have more warehouse space. I'm going to put a rack right here so I can utilize the space better.
Yeah.
And then you show up and you're like, I wasn't like that last time I was here. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong.
Yes. Thank you for saying
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
But, like, that's not the way you do things. So we're going to need to do something to document that and make sure that it's built correctly and you didn't cause any issues to the existing building. Your occupancy didn't change and things in that space didn't become unsafe doing that.
I think it's really important for people to realize that you're basically making sure people are safe from dying, right?
It's life safety.
Life
basically.
safety is your job.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's clear to the audience that, like, what happens is if they take down a wall and put up a rack, it might obstruct a sprinkler, or maybe the sprinkler is now not the right height in the building. So if there's a problem, that it distributes the water correctly, right? I mean, can you expand on that a little bit?
If you were to install a rack and not bolt it to the floor correctly, and then you loaded it with more weight than it was capable of holding, it wasn't engineered, it could pose to be a serious life issue. Let's say something on that rack caught fire, and the fire grew and became uncontrollable. When the fire crew shows up to combat that fire, there's a possibility that rack could fall over on them while they're trying to extinguish it.
Right.
Or somebody walk into the warehouse one day, the rack just falls over on them.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. And these codes were put in place not because someone's just making this shit up. It's because someone's died like that before, right? I mean,
we have that saying. It's we don't have a job and we're not here to like create revenue and make money. Fire prevention and life safety is not about making money. It's about providing a service to the public and to our first responders and making sure that every building occupied by people, they can get out safely and they can do their business safely, and there's no major concerns that would cause a threat to life, basically.
So there's when we like transfer this information back to ponds, which is cool. It's like most of the audience wants to hear, like, how does it relate to ponds?
Yeah.
People, there are some life-threatening things that can happen with ponds, right? I think that's important to know. But I don't want this to be a scare tactic kind of podcast. I want people to realize that there's, like, what I'm talking about, like the basic inspection for people is like, hey, this plant's getting out of control. Hey, your fish are getting too big. Hey, you might need to expand upon your biological filtration to handle that many fish. Oh, you're actually overfeeding your fish currently the way it's going, and I can tell you're overfeeding your fish because of this reason, that reason, this reason. And then all I want to do as an inspector for a pond is like help them make some adjustments. So like for us, we have a lot of customers, over 25 years of building that customer base, and we have a lot of customers. We go to their place once a month. We go to their place, and that's part of our job. Like once a month is just like, you're supposed to be doing a little bit of work to your pond once a week, just a little bit. Just got to touch it a little bit, and we're not going to do all that work that you were supposed to do every week in one visit.
Yeah.
What we're going to do is like, you do your work, and then we're going to come in once a month, and we're going to make sure you're staying on top of the things. The pond's not getting out of control, and we're going to do some service on filters and stuff for the harder stuff, right? But the basics. But we have clients that we go to weekly, to monthly, to twice a week, and then we have customers that just want us annually, or biannually, or quarterly. So when we go out, I mean, it's a new campaign that we're going to push for our company. It's like we are inspecting ponds. We're not service guys. We're not just coming to clean the fish poop. We're like actually like, is the pump working correctly? Is the air system running right? Are you feeding too much? What's the water quality like? That's really what our job is, right?
Yeah. People might make a small change and not even know that it could be problematic down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to come in and be badge heavy and tell them everything they're doing wrong. It's more or less to be like, let's get you to comply with education. Like it's more or less about educating teaching, showing, explaining, and then somebody might go, I never would have even thought of that. Like, yeah, that could be problematic down the line. You're right. I can't store 5,000 pallets in my warehouse. I thought I could.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll even get a phone call like, hey, I want to do this, this, and this in this space. So we come out and we do an inspection. And we look at the space, we look at the square footage, we look at what the building's built out of. If it has fire sprinklers in it, does it not have fire sprinklers in it? Where is it zoned? What is it you want to do? And then we can like go to some code somewhere and we can have a code path to figure out, yeah, that's doable or that's absolutely not doable, unfortunately. And if you want to do that, you have to do this, this, and this. So we actually give them a road to follow, a path, so that they have an idea.
For compliance.
Yeah.
Like, you'll be under compliance, and compliance is not like under your law that you're making. It's compliance, so like it's less likely someone's going to die.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. It's interesting because, in construction, well, I mean, pond construction is construction, right? But there's no code book for pond construction. It's like the wild, wild west. So there are a lot of contractors who get away with a lot of bullshit, shady shit. But then I know a lot of like amazing craftsmen, like that kind of stuff. I think one thing that's special about the way we run our business is that we're fish freaks. Like,
Yeah.
most everyone on our team has an aquarium or a reptile. I mean, they're into animals and so forth. And so when we come out to see a pond, we're looking at habitat. We're not just looking at, does the waterfall work and do the lights work? We're looking at habitat. Is it safe for the fish? Is it safe for the animals? Where's the interaction spot for the people, and how is that working out? Is it safe to walk around the pond without it collapsing?
Yeah.
Those kind of things, and that's why I think what we do is really important and special as a business, because there's a lot of landscape contractors, and while they might do really good work and nice system, they don't understand ecosystems like we do because we're fish freaks.
Yeah.
We're geeks like that.
It'd be like somebody calling you up and saying, hey, I need you to come inspect my pond. I'm having an issue. My fish keep dying. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, okay. And you come out, you do the inspection. Everything looks good. Filtration looks good. The UV filter bulb's replaced. And then you start to ask questions like, so what is it you're doing here? Like, what have you done to the pond? Like, oh, I pour a gallon of algicide in every week.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah. I had a conversation with some of my peers when I thought about doing this campaign, because we do a lot of inspections, and I had this like epiphany, like we need to have like we're pond inspectors. Like that's what we do.
Yeah.
Even like we have service techs, and we have service and repair teams, and we have construction teams, and we have manufacturing teams, all the different teams in our business, but like we're all to some degree some inspectors. And just like you said, like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know everything, right?
Yeah.
And I know you ran into that. Why don't you share a little bit of that? I
prided myself on being an NFPA 13 water-based fire protection specialist. That's what was my bread and butter for 17 years. I installed and sometimes designed fire sprinkler systems. Like I could be a fire inspector. I got this down. I can do this. That's a piece of the pie that big. I don't know, and I walked into this and I didn't know anything about ANSEL systems, fire alarm systems, energen systems, the tanks in the ground at fire stations, med gas systems. I'm like, there's a lot more I need to learn.
Yeah.
And there's an entire code book on stuff I've never even heard about. So you can't know it all.
Well, that's what's cool about what you guys have going, and I want to make sure the audience realizes this, is like there's a team of fire inspectors. You guys are like the Navy SEALs of fire department, right? Like
we have a great team. Yeah.
Yeah. So each person on the team is really specialized in their stuff.
Somebody specializes in something, yeah.
Everyone knows, like, hey, these are the code books that we have to reference to help people make sure that they're complying with safety.
Yeah.
and I feel good about that in our team. You know, I'm the battalion chief, if you want to call it like
Exactly.
that, right? Because I think that's another really a special thing about our business that I want to talk about, and I think it's important to share with people is because I like all ponds. I like all types of pond construction. I like turtle ponds, duck ponds, ecosystem ponds, recreational ponds, concrete ponds, gunite ponds, liner ponds, clay ponds. I like chuck in a bucket. I like water with fish in it,
Yeah.
period. And I'm fascinated by all that stuff, right? And there's a lot of specialists out there that only do ponds one way. So like I'm only doing dedicated koi ponds, gunite. Hey, I'm only doing liner installations with rock and gravel. And then you got guys that want to do ponds with suction grids and stuff like that. Like I've dedicated myself to all of those systems. I love them all.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like I have a little edge on that just because of my passion. I'm just more passionate about those different types of environments.
Yeah.
Oh, I was talking to my to some of my peers in my contractor peer group that we have, the coaching group, and what was going on in there was they were like, I don't know if I like the word inspector. It's like I think it could be intimidating because like what would it look like if I was going to do a design consultation for someone for their pond? Like, hey, we want to build a pond. We would do a design consultation, and I show up with a Pond Digger branded pond inspector hat. They're like, oh, but the inspector's here, like, you know. I feel like it should give people confidence, like, right?
So me being coming from both sides of the fence,
Mm-hmm.
I was a contractor that installed a system, and I had to have my work inspected by a guy that would show up and walk the entire thing with his magnifying glass and pick it apart. And like that can't be like that. The inspector's going to know that's wrong. This is wrong. That sprinkler head's too far from that wall. So like you had to make sure your stuff was dialed so that that inspector wouldn't fail you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've dealt with the type of inspector that's like, wrong, 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 you failed. Fix it and call me back when it's done. And I've also dealt with the inspector that's like, that's not the right way to do it. Here's the code chapter that says how it should be done. Let's get that fixed that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be a lot more susceptible to that guy than the guy that's just like, your whole pond's wrong. Whoever built it's wrong.
Yeah.
And you're doing it wrong. So have a nice day.
Right.
You know,
with no path for correction.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
There always has to be that path for correction.
I found that in our career now, after we've been doing it this long, and the way the economy is changing and so forth like that, we have a lot of people that are calling us like, "Hey, I just bought a house. It has a koi pond. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do about it." You know?
Yeah.
And so like we basically provide an inspection, or if someone calls me. Here's a good example for that. Is like if someone calls me that we maybe built the pond, we haven't seen them in 8 years. They're like, "Hey, we want you to come and do a fall cleaning on our pond." I'm like, oh, "Okay, cool. I'd love the opportunity." Just out of curiosity, when's the last time it was professionally managed or serviced or cleaned? Oh, we've been doing it ourselves. It's cool. It's just like it's a little overgrown, but everything's cool. And so I'm like, we have to do an inspection before I just send a team out to just do a cleaning on a pond that no one's seen you in 7 years.
Absolutely. I can't just sign your business license off and let you move in and operate without doing an inspection.
Right.
I need to make sure that it's compliant and it's the way it should be done.
Well, it's important for people to realize that, like, sometimes things going wrong with their pond that they don't even know. Just like you said, sometimes something's wrong, but they don't even know it. So sometimes we go out to a pond and there's a problem, they don't even know it. And then we fix something, and then the problem really shows itself because we've made some corrections.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, you screwed my pond up when you did the cleaning. Like, no, we didn't. It was already had a problem, and there's so many variables that can happen. So I'm really adamant about that. And this is like longevity in my career and in my business experience. So it's like, when I was only in business for 5, 6, 7 years, we'd be like, "Hey, I need cleaning." Like, "All right, we're coming." Like, we would just go.
Yeah.
And I had to like experience that kind of issue many times over. It doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, it sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad. right? It took me a lot of failure to figure out that, going out and working on ponds. And, it's weird if I really think this through, there's been times we've gone out and done like a spring cleaning on a pond, and we get there and the fish are sick. And like this is pre like iPhone days. We can go like, hey, this is September 14th. It's 2023. We're at the Johnson residence. We're getting ready to clean the pond. As you can see, this fish has got ulcers. This fish has this. Someone's listless. Whatever. We document it now. That's part of our like inspection process.
Yeah.
Because we have such a big team now. I got 10 different techs out in the field. One guy might do an inspection, and then I'll have another team member go out and do the repair. It's nice to take a look at that, right?
Yeah.
That document. This was back then, but like, the fish are sick, so we like, what do we do? No one's answering the door. We can't call them. We clean the pond and put the fish back in. It's like, hey, my fish are all sick since you cleaned the pond. But like, no, you just haven't been paying attention to your pond.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just cleaned it, and the techs saw the problem when we got here. We cleaned it anyways because it was too dirty. That was one of the reasons they're sick. We're trying to get the water quality back in shape. So like, that was a tough mistake for me.
Yeah.
We didn't get paid. The client was unhappy. It was just a mess. And we can go in with completely good intentions and still strike out and get in trouble, right? So nowadays it's like, hey, if I need to see pictures. I need to give you a quote. I need to, I might have to put boots on the ground and have an inspector check out the pond.
Yeah.
So I mean, now it's a big part of our business, and I think it's cool. I'd like to think that I'm like leading the path a little bit. I'm going on off-roading on a trail that's not really there because it's not really happening in the pond industry.
Yeah.
Pond inspections, right? I want to spearhead it, bring it to light, let people know like this is what should happen. And I checked some of my podcasts. I think it's in podcast 12, the episode 12 that we did, which was like 4 or 5 years ago. I talked about having a professional inspect the pond. I don't know if I used the word inspect per se, but it's like you need to have a professional put eyeballs on your pond like once a year. It's like the best offensive move you can do to make sure your pond, you protect your investment and your pets.
Yeah.
Right.
An example of that on my end is, we walk into a warehouse and they have a rack that they store pallets of merchandise up like 15 feet high along the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And we walk over there and the rack is like shimmied, kind of crooked, and it's not bolted to the ground.
Yeah. And
there's like pallets of a lot of weight on the rack, and you can even see like the structural supports like bowing.
Oh crap!
Like, hey, who put this rack in here? And they're like, oh, we did it ourselves. I'm like, you probably should have a professional rack company come and do an inspection and an evaluation on it, and they'll be able to tell you what the maximum amount of weight you can put on each level is, and they'll be able to engineer it and design it in a way that it's bolted to the ground, it's fastened to the floor correctly, it won't tip over, and it can hold this much weight.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't even think of that.
Right.
I'm like, yeah.
What's interesting that you mentioned that is like a lot of the guys that I know, they over-engineer shit.
Yeah.
Lots of concrete, lots of rebar, lots of whatever, mortar, foam, whatever. Like, but with that being said, I think that probably most people just under-engineer because they don't really know any better, right? Because they just. I think in the pond industry, it is such a wild, wild west. There's a lot of DIY stuff. All those TV shows. It's like, hey, build this in 24 hours. So there's a lot of inspiration to do it yourself. There's a lot of gratitude. A lot of inspiration to do that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
I think people kind of run into trouble that way, especially if it's completely out of trade.
Yeah.
I want to talk about. It's our job. For me, I talk about it in another podcast for sure, where I'm an optimistic person. I'm always looking on the bright side. I'm a half glass is half full kind of person, or let's put a goldfish in it. That's the kind of guy I am. But when I look at ponds, I'm always looking for what's wrong. Like what could have been done better? What's wrong with this thing? And that's our job. That's your job. Talk about that. You're looking in for You're not looking for a violation. You're looking for things that could go wrong that happen to be violations.
Yeah, I mean, just even having your fire extinguisher not tagged or serviced, that's a violation. But am I going to come in here badge heavy and list and write down every single violation that you're doing in your business? No. I'm looking for big ticket items. So like the whole top.
Wait. Because when you say big ticket items, it's not like money per se.
No.
Right? It's not a money thing. It's
Not
like,
money thing.
It's a big risky or big risk items that you're looking for.
It's
High
like
risk.
things that would like equal catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
So like somebody's pond filtration, their pump dying, and it not being a concern to them, or their aerator going out, and now they don't have oxygen in their pond, and their fish don't have any oxygen. So in our case, it would be like you walk into a warehouse and they have MAQ, maximum allowable quantity. They're way over the amount of like flammable liquid they can have,
Or fish in their pond.
or fish in their pond,
Right.
or hey,
We need to make a code book. Be like, your livestock is MAQ, totally MAQ.
yeah,
They'd be like, what's an MAQ?
yeah. So for the size of your warehouse and the height of the building, and it not having sprinklers, your maximum allowable quantity is this.
Yeah.
So like people that store rubber tires, they just want to fill the tires up in their warehouse all the way to the ceiling.
Yeah.
It's a Class A rubber. I mean, it's extremely flammable.
Yeah.
You got to be careful with how much you do that.
Right.
And then you want to store aerosols right next to it. And then you want to do welding over there in the corner.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're getting a little crazy here.
That's a nice recipe right
Yeah.
there.
It's not going to go good.
I think for the most part, people go at it harmless. They're not like, oh, this is a bad idea, I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They
might not they don't even know that's wrong, or they can't do that,
Yeah.
Like
They might not know it's flammable. It's a rubber tire that catches fire? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's weird.
It's not even a thought.
Yeah.
Oh, that can't catch fire.
Well, you mentioned about that I want to be careful how I say this, but you mentioned like a sneaker a sneaker warehouse, that has 500,000 square feet and is filled with sneakers with
Million
rubber.
square feet.
Well, I was trying to be low key, bro.
A million square feet of shoes.
Yeah, and that's dangerous.
If you're storing it over 15 feet high and it's a million square
They're
foot,
shoes, bro.
Shoes
don't catch fire.
It's fabric. It's linen. It's rubber. It's all flammable material.
So you shared with me a crazy scenario. If that building caught on fire, you said it would burn for a month, uncontrollably. You couldn't put it out.
It has the possibility to do that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that blew my mind. That's just insane. There's proof right there. Like that kind of shocked me. I'm like, what?
I'm sure people have seen video footage on the news of like a tire storage facility outside, and it catches fire. They just let it burn. And it's all about just containing.
That's all you can do.
That's all you can do. It's so hot and it burns for so long, you can't put it out. So you just contain it and make sure that it doesn't spread to properties or buildings.
Yeah.
Around it.
So I mean, it's just ignorance on most part. People just don't realize that.
Yeah.
They have kids, they have their lives, they have their jobs, they have their hobbies, they have the stuff that like they have 1 million square foot of shoes could burn for a month. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
One of the podcasts that I did that I think has a lot of relevance to this topic, it's called the 3-year pond syndrome, and I've shared that with a lot of my peers in the pond construction and maintenance business, service and maintenance, and they're like, "You mean new pond syndrome?" I'm like, "No, the 3-year pond syndrome, right?" And I think this is a real relevance to help people understand that they should have some professional eyes look at it once a year, because when you first install a pond, you find the recipe. If, let's say it's your first pond, you don't really know what's going on, and you figure out how much to feed the fish, and how much water treatments, and how much water to change, and it takes you 2, 3, 4 months to figure it out. Now you're a hobbyist.
Yeah.
With 6 months experience, and so you're like, this is my recipe. I do this, I do this, I do this, I do that. My fish live, and everything's perfect. But 3 years from now, it's a big, big difference. The fish are bigger, right? They had babies. There's more fish in the thing, you know. And so when you first started that pond in the first 6 months, you got 10 fish. They're 6 inches each, you know, and now you have 60 fish that are, 14 or 18 or 20 inches big, right? So that's where that difference changes. And if you're not like a really intense hobbyist that's like, you know, testing water maybe or really on top of the clarity and filters and stuff, you're just doing the exact same routine you did when you started the pond, but the pond's not doing well. It's not responding as well as it was because the ecosystem is alive and it's changing, right?
I can't tell you the last time I checked my pH on mine.
Well,
I'm an inspector.
well,
Probably should be checking the pH.
Look, there's a lot of hobbyists that don't like regularly check their water parameters in that regard.
Yeah.
Because everything else that you have is pretty on. I'm not saying don't test your water. I'm just saying there's a lot of really good hobbyists that only test when they start to see something a little weird going on.
Yeah.
And the little weird going is not, oh, all my fish are dead. A little weird going on is, hey, they're not eating quite as much as they do, and it's not related to temperature change.
Yeah.
Or, hey, this one fish is like not acting like with the pack, so he's like kind of staying alone. Something's off. Something's weird. I need to test something now. I need to like hold the boat, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I would say that you're in that category of person that's really got an eye on attention like that. But I do want to talk about what's going wrong. Like when I go to a pond, what's wrong? Like, is the turnover rate there? Like, oh, you know what? One thing you talked about, I think was important, was about a pump failure or oxygen, the aerator not working on the pond, right? So, as a builder, for me, I love doing redundant systems, and there's no code books, and it costs more money to do it that way. But I always make the suggestion, like, hey, let's have a redundant system. Let's have like maybe 2 sources of electricity, so if there is a failure, your whole system doesn't collapse.
Yeah.
Let's have an air pump on one system, and let's have a waterfall pump, running circulation and biofilters. So there's redundancy there because there's 2 sources of power, 2 sources of oxygen. One fails, we have backup.
Yep.
Right? And so there's no code book like that. Like, what was it? WAQ? MAQ?
MAQ, maximum
so there's
allowable
MAQ, maximum quantity of fish that you can have in the pond, and then like some redundancy in the pond. And these are just suggestions that I make. And again, it's because I'm a freaking fish freak.
Yeah.
I want more fish. I want that activity. I want to make sure they're healthy.
Fire prevention, we're people freaks.
Yeah.
Ambulatory care facilities, hospitals, they have backup generators.
Right.
All those red plugs on the walls, people's life support are plugged into those plugs. Power goes out, there's a diesel generator that kicks in, and the power has to be turned back on within, I'd have to look it up, but it's either 10 or 20 seconds.
That's fast.
That has to click back on again.
That's fast.
Keep all that life support running.
I have a lot of clients that are so into their fish, and some have really high-end systems like that, but I have a lot of clients that have backup generators specifically for their fish.
Yep.
In fact, we have our backup generator here at the ranch. It's primarily because we have all the fish tanks.
Yeah.
I mean, the freezers are fine. I mean,
it's not very often the power goes out in Las Vegas, but you have to put this system in here in place, and it might not even get used. Right. It has to be there. It's a fail-safe, just in case.
I don't want to bore people too much with some code safety stuff. Oh, I actually do want to bore some people with some stuff right here, real quick. No, this is not boring to me. This is very funny because I remember the last time you were out here, like a month ago, we went into AT&T, and we're not officially sponsored by AT&T, but it's really windy in town. Like the doors kept opening and closing, and the beeper, like ding ding, like every time the door would move, the beeper would go off. And so when we went to go in, the door was locked. I'm like, oh, the door's locked. That's weird.
Yeah.
But then I thought, oh, there was another AT&T that got boosted all the time, so they locked it for safety. They were scared they were going to get robbed. They're like, is this guy going to rob us? He looks like he might not kill us. Let's let him in, right? Thank you, California. Thank you, Governor Newsom.
Yeah.
And then, But when we walked into this place, I just thought they must get robbed, right? And this is not cool, right? But when you walked in, you're like, that door should not be locked. That's a danger to that's a potential risk to my life.
And just
Go into that.
Just for the record, I have no jurisdiction in this state, but you cannot bar people from leaving or getting. There needs to be means of egress. You should be able to have any way to get out of that building.
We were literally locked in the building.
So
just because it was windy outside and the door kept beep, beep, beep.
And it's not so much, I guess, like I said, it's so much to know. You'd have to go refer to a code book. But from my understanding, and just me being a person, I would not want to be locked into a building that I was not able to get out of. And depending on the occupancy number of the business, you only really need one exit if it's under 50 people in my jurisdiction. And if there's only one way in and one way out, and you come in there to do business, and somebody in there puts the key in the door and locks it shut and breaks the key off in the door
on purpose or accident,
and a catastrophe happens in the back room and there's a fire, how do I get out? Or, worst case scenario, you have an active shooter situation and somebody comes in and they break the lock off intentionally, and now you have no way to get out and you have to deal with that individual.
Yeah.
So it's just about life safety and awareness, and you don't ever want to be put in a situation or a place where you can't get out of something.
Yeah, because that kind of shook me a little bit, and I'm like, oh wow, now I'm kind of getting it. You know?
Yeah.
I understand, like, hey, we need a certain amount of sprinklers, but that same AT&T store we went in, like, I don't know, 4 months ago, you and I were in there, and you're like, that sprinkler's too close to the, what was it?
The sprinkler head was too far away from the wall.
Yeah,
so there wasn't adequate coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I remember, like, challenging you on it, and I'm like, I'm going to get a tape measure. I went and got a tape measure out of the truck. I remember the people looking at us in there like, what are you measuring? Like, I'm inspecting this fire system right now. Yeah, this is not my jurisdiction, but I'm checking shit out. But, I mean, that shows you how clueless or unaware people are of like that. Because now that we've had that conversation, you know, we've gone out to have sushi, and we were, like, evaluating in and out egress. We were evaluating how many extension cords were running in there. Like, all of a sudden, I can't even go out to a nice dinner because of you, because now I'm freaking out about getting out of this building.
Well, it's something as simple as even exit signs, you know?
Yeah.
You put all these racks or different corridors or walls up, and then they put no exit signs in.
Yeah.
And you've never been there before. And you go in, you go all the way down the hallway, and you go to the very back room. Lights go out. Power outage.
You're in the dark.
How do I get out of here?
You got to get your iPhone out of your back pocket, turn on the
and then
flashlight.
you're like feeling the wall, and you're trying to feel for doorknobs, and then you get to a doorknob, and it's like it's locked from the outside, and it doesn't have a one-turn motion to exit. Mm-hmm. It's like it becomes a very serious situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like us at Home Depot today, you know, like, and here's the thing, like, Home Depot is not intentionally installing fire extinguishers at the improper height.
Yeah, like 8 feet off the ground.
No, it wasn't 8 feet. It was at least 6 feet off the ground, though. 5.5, 6 feet off the ground to the top of the fire hydrant, which clearly, you know, someone in a wheelchair is not going to be able to, like, get to that and help. You know, the fire extinguishers are to help us get out of a doorway or something.
Yeah, right? If you had fire blocking your way of getting through or getting out, that extinguisher is within 75 feet distance of your exit, so that you can like utilize it to like cover the flame in a powder that will necessarily not burn. It's not to really, not always. It's not there to put the fire out. Mm-hmm. It's to cover the flame or the heat in a substance that is non-flammable, to allow you a way to get past it.
Yeah. And
usually you take the extinguisher with you and you use it to make sure you get to an exit.
Right.
That's what it's for.
Well, when we had the apple fire, I remember, like, I was like, get the fire extinguisher.
And they didn't work. They didn't put the fire out.
I mean, it was out of control. I mean,
yeah.
But then that was a real realization. It's like, this is just to get out of a door. Like, this to get through that doorway if you needed to.
Yeah. Like this fire, I mean, it would put that out.
Yeah.
If that was to creep across the floor and catch all that, it's
you're done.
It's past the point now.
Yeah. What people can do to inspect their ponds, or either whether they're doing them themselves or whether, what they can maybe expect if they have a pond inspector come out to their place, right? So we're looking for, I can see from a bottom drain, let's say with aeration coming out of the bottom of it. I mean, I can look at a bottom drain and go like, hey, that's not 40 liters of air coming out of that bottom drain like it's supposed to be, right? And so that could mean that one of the diaphragms inside their air pump has failed.
Yeah.
Needs to be replaced, right? So, I mean, I imagine, this is funny. I'm going to go here. When you go in to get your oil changed on your car, right? They're like, oh, your air filter's screwed up. It's like, $120. You're like, oh God, all right, replace it. Like, oh, your brake pads are only down to like 12%. You want us to schedule a brake, a brake job on your, like, oh God. They're like, hey, $900. Oh God, so.
Like the 16-point inspection they do on top of your oil change. I just want the oil change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But because you don't want to spend a bunch of money, right? But I mean, that's a service that you should know, like your efficiency for your fuel, efficiency for your motor, like that air filter is pretty important.
Well, of course, you want to do an inspection. You want to just tally up the list of things I need to pay for.
You get all pissed about it, but the reality is, like, I can be upset because now I got to spend $1,200 on an air filter and some freaking brake pads and whatever, right? Yeah, that's annoying, but at the same time, it's like, well, I really do want my brakes to work well this time, and I don't want to like scratch the rotors and have to replace it. It is a service, right? So, but I mean, when I'm going in to look at a pond, I'm thinking this 10-point pond. I'm looking under the hood.
Yeah.
It is a 10-point pond inspection.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the seals on the waterfalls. Do I have roots coming through? The pond might not be leaking yet, but if you drain the pond, like this used to happen. I had to figure out this the hard way. Pond is perfectly holding water. Nothing's wrong with it. I see a little bit of roots coming through the skimmer faceplate. Not bad, but I'm like, ooh, there's definitely some roots right there. I mention it to the homeowner. There's some roots coming through. We should probably do this. I want to do it right now. The pond's not leaking. I'm like, okay, cool. We do the cleaning on the pond. And simply by taking all the water out of the pond, compression changes on that seal.
Yep.
Because now I don't have the pressure of the water holding it in place. You have this, the compression changes. You fill the pond up. The pond's fucking leaking the next day.
Yep.
And they're like, "Oh, my pond's leaking now." I'm like, "Wait a minute." So it took me a while to figure that out. I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
And so now, if it's like, hey, if there's roots coming through, it could start leaking when I leave. I just want you to know that, and I have to make that written out, just like you said. I have to show them the path to correction.
Yep.
Whether they choose to do it or not, then it's on them, right?
When I install fire suppression for a living, fire sprinklers, that situation would happen with piping in the air. Every joint where there was a pipe connected to another pipe, there'd be a gasket with a coupling there. Mm-hmm. The thing's been sitting under pressure for months. And I go there and I drain the pressure off of it to do work over here, and then I fill it back up. That gasket and that gasket and that gasket start to drip because you've relieved the pressure on that rubber gasket, and it's like restricted, and now water starts to leak past it.
Yeah. Because
it's so dry rotted and old inside there.
Yeah.
It's like the system was fine before I started working.
Yeah.
Now I got 20 gaskets leaking, and they look at you like, you screwed up my system.
Oh, you overpressurized?
Yeah. What'd you do?
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't do anything. I just drained it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I had to figure that out the hard way. So, like when I'm doing the pond inspections, I'm like looking at seals. I'm looking at, UV seals. I'm looking at UV lighting. And some of the things like that goes back to ignorance. They don't really know that it's right or wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, when's the last time you changed this light bulb on your UV? I'm like, oh, I've never changed it.
Never changed it.
Yeah. Well, your pond's 7 years old.
We need to get you up to compliance through education. It needs to be changed every year. At this day.
Yeah.
And I believe it's Mother's Day, right?
That is accurate.
Yeah.
So you're going to be a pond inspector too, by the way. Yeah. I'll get you a hat when they land. But yeah, those are the things. How do you say it? That was brilliant the way you said that. It's compliance through education.
Compliance through
We're
education.
We're going to get you to compliance
through
education.
I'm biting that off of my supervisor. Very knowledgeable guy. He's top notch.
It's fucking vital.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from him in just the 3 months. It's amazing.
I think that's really cool too, like that learning thing. I do crave that. Like, I want to learn something new about an ecosystem. I want to learn something new about a fish. I think that's cool. And I've definitely seen you expand a little bit when you went from something you knew like the back of your hand, the book that's like this big, you knew everything you needed to know in it.
Yeah.
You tell me what page the code is for pressure, and now you're like, okay, I got new stuff to learn.
So definitely humbling for sure. Yeah. I didn't know it all. Wow, there's a whole nother book.
Yeah.
It's this big. It's bigger than the book I knew.
Well, that's what's cool about me when I talk. That's what's cool about me. No, that's what's cool for me when I talk to my peers in Florida. They have completely different ecosystem out there. A lot of my peers that I deal with, they are like really good at concrete ponds. I don't do that many gunite ponds. Maybe one every 12 to 18 months. That'll be a part of my routine. And while we have it down and we do them good, I have guys that do them all the time. So I might call them and go like, hey, I'm running into this situation. This is what we're looking at. And I can just lean into them and they can go, hey, this is what I've learned and this is what I do. And it's like the code book is in their head. Like, I have my code for SoCal, and I know a little bit about the code in other places, but I can call someone and get the code. Hey, you do a lot of concrete ponds. Tell me about this. Hey, you do a lot of clay ponds. What are you about that? So that's what I love about my network and my community.
I mean, we have guys that are, they're hazmat guys, and their knowledge and expertise is in hazmat. And I can't walk in and know everything there is to know about hazmat. So I can't be expected to walk into a business and tell them and know every single chemical and liquid and what classification it is and the MAQ of what it's supposed to be. I need to go refer a book. If I still can't find it in the book because it's so new to me or something that I'm not rounded in, I have to have them fill out a hazardous material inventory statement, and then I have to come back to my team and we got to figure out all these things. How much can they have of every single item?
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of work. It's not that I can have an answer for you right now.
Yeah.
That depends. Let me get back to you. Let me do some research. You might walk into a pond and it's got an issue and you can't solve it in that hour or 2 hours you're there. And you're like, I'm going to have to do some research. I have to do a hydro test. I'm going to have to come back again and check on it. I'm going to have to run water down the waterfall and check for water, and I'm going to come back next week and see how it's reacting and what it's doing. I might need to treat the pond with this treatment and come and check on it again. I might have to check the pH 3 weeks from now.
That takes me like a segue to, like leak detection, and I don't even like that name's used to like the swimming pool industry and some other kind of stuff is leak detection, right? There are services that do leak detection. For me, and for as far as a pond goes, I like to think of it. I actually do think of it, and I quote it out like that to my prospects and clients. It's like, we need to do a leak inspection, right?
Yep.
So the inspection comes before detection. You can't detect anything without an inspection. So I think when people call up, my pond's leaking, what do I do? Like, hey, we need to schedule an inspection. Because sometimes we can go out there, it's just a simple low edge, a plant, plants pushing down the edge, or sometimes on a new construction, we have heavy rains and maybe it wasn't compacted well enough, or maybe the rainwater runoff hits one little section and drops an edge. Sometimes these leaks can be fixed very easily, right?
In Vegas, you came with me to a pond consultation.
Oh, yeah.
And 30 minutes of being there, it turned into an inspection.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I'd lose this water every day. I have to turn the garden hose on. I don't know what the problem is. I'm like, well, I didn't know any of that. And you rummaged around the back of the waterfall for about, I'd say, 10 minutes. You're like, yeah, a leak. It's right here. I was like, what?
Yeah.
It's a pond inspection.
It's interesting, too, because, our inspections, we have a flat rate. Like, hey, this is what our inspection is to get an inspector out there, right? Pond inspector. And sometimes we can solve the problem very quickly, like 10 minutes. Like, okay, here's the problem, right?
Yeah.
And one time, my wife, she like overheated the dryer, right?
Okay.
So the dryer it was lopsided. This was a long time ago. I'm trying to remember the whole scenario, but it was lopsided, and it was like doom, 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 like that, right? And somehow it overheated and like just shut down. And so I don't know. I was out building. I was doing something, and I was like, well, let's get a service tech out to take a look at it.
Yeah.
It's still under warranty, or it's new, or whatever, right? And he comes out. It's like, I don't know, it was like back then it was like 100 and a quarter or whatever like that. The technician shows up, it's 100 and a quarter. He walks in, he does a couple things. Like 5 minutes later, he's like, okay, it's done. That'll be 125. And I'm like, oh. But like, while some people can be mad, like, you were here for 5 minutes, you're gonna charge me 125 bucks. It's like, well, your problem's fixed. You want me here for 3-4 hours?
Yeah.
Messing around in your house?
Yeah.
While you guys are trying to make dinner and watch TV and play with the kids?
Yeah.
Or do you want me to just fix it real quick and get the fuck out of here? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how it's cool to be. I remember I recently went to an inspection, and this was work by a different contractor. A different contractor had done some work. It wasn't working well. Contractor wouldn't call back. He finds me, come out and do this. I was like, we need an inspection. We go out there, and I literally walked onto the property. I already kind of had an assumption of what was the problem before I got there, just because I've been doing it for 25 years.
Yep.
Because I've screwed up like that before, I know what was wrong, because I did it wrong once,
Mhm.
right? And I think I hung out with the guy for like 10 or 15 minutes, and he was just talking, asking questions, talking. And I literally spent like 15 minutes with him, and 14 and a half minutes was just talking and listening to him, and the other 30 seconds was putting eyes on it in person, going, here's the problem. So it was literally like a 30-second fix. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's $295, please,
Yeah.
And now you know what your problem is. Get it fixed, or we can talk to you about us fixing it for you, right? And it wasn't something I could just fix, because sometimes if I do an inspection and then I can lift an edge up, do a nice little fold, push a little dirt, I don't mind getting my hands dirty.
Yeah.
But when it's like, hey, we got to break out tools, we got to come back here, we got to, take a little water out of the pond and make this happen. That's a totally different scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it goes down. But so leak inspection, I think, is really important. Without leak inspection, you can't do detection, right? And then I think the annual thing is so important. I want to share with people, because not everyone can just pay to have a service tech or a pond inspector come out to their place once a month or once a week or every other week. That's not in the cards for everyone. I totally realize that. But I would say, trying to think if it's spring or fall, is the most important. I think spring's probably the most important. If they were only going to have an inspector come out once, when would it be? I would say spring.
Spring.
Yeah, I would want people to realize that, because that's the time when the fish should be coming out of their cold winter slumber, right? And they could have potential health problems at that time. So I think it's a good time of the year to have it done right then, because you can really get in front of potential illnesses and sicknesses with the fish.
Yeah.
And then it's not hot yet. The cool thing is that if you really go in spring, you have a month or two to make some big changes to the pond before it gets really hot, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's cool. So when you go out to your pond every day, do you look for things that are wrong?
Yes.
Because I think the last time I was at your house, you were like messing with an air tubing. You're like, oh, I can see the air tubing. This is annoying me. I gotta get a new air pump, and it's just like it's a constant little thing. But I think that's part of the hobby, right?
Yeah, it is. Like I go out there and I'm not even looking at it or enjoying it. I'm inspecting it. So I'm sitting on my patio looking at it, and I'm just inspecting the edge, and I'm making sure that the aeration discs that are in the bottom from my air pump are like doing the proper amount of bubbles that they should be doing. Because I know when it's like starting to get a little clogged up with some algae,
Yeah.
it starts to not get so bubbly. So I'm like, probably need to pull out my disc and scrub those with a little scrub brush. Or I always pull the rock lid off my skimmer and I check the bolts Make sure they're not rusted out. Like, I'm always inspecting
Make
it.
sure the water level's at the right
Make sure the
spot.
water level is at that rock, and this rock. I have 3 points of water level that I can eye. I even find myself in the kitchen in the morning making my coffee before I go to work, and I'll look out my back sliding window. I'm like, man, water level's still the same it was last night.
Yeah.
I check my pond for low water level daily.
Okay, this is where I want you to go. I think this is real beneficial for anyone listening to it that has a pond. What are the things that you look for every day you look at the pond? You're inspecting your pond every single day. Share with the audience what you do.
So the first thing I look for is I look at the flow rate on my waterfall. So when it starts to get real gummed up with like string algae, or the waterfall filter starts to get a little too compacted with muck, it changes the way that the water flows over the lip and then runs cascades down in the pond. It'll actually like slow down, and you can visually tell. You hear it splash, and it's kind of like you can hear it. It's more like you're using your vision, you're using your hearing, and you can like see it and hear it. I'm like, that doesn't sound as crisp and as aggressive as it usually does. So I'll go pull the lid, and sure enough, the pad's solid green, like filled up.
Yeah.
So I'll pull that out, spray it out real quick, put it back in, and it starts running again like it used to. It's like, all right, took care of that.
Yeah.
Another one is water level. I check the water level, and my aeration, my bubbles. I check that too frequently.
And that's just a visual.
Just a
right?
visual, yep.
So these are things that people can do. Just like they don't have to hire an inspector. They don't have to just have to look at water level, look at flow rate, look at air bubbles. Okay.
That's how I know if my filtration needs to be cleaned or not, or if I've got an obstruction in one of my hoses or something. Another one I do is I don't do as much as I check water level, but I'd say at least twice a month. I'll check the edge. Like, an animal could have stepped on the edge and shifted a rock, and now I have a low edge. I already have a low edge as it is in the front where my patio meets that flagstone. I know there's only like a half inch of liner there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll move that rock and check water level right there and make sure it didn't drop down or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I'll walk around the edge with my foot, and I can feel the soil if it goes like, oh no. So I always check for like moist soil around the edges too. But not as often.
I do want to talk about water level for a minute because, we live in the desert, even in Southern California, this is desert. So our ponds, every single pond has an automatic fill or
Yeah.
a float valve on there so water can get added. And there's a delicate balance where the water level can still stay like where it's supposed to be, but the pond is leaking, right? So the autofill is just running just enough to keep that water to the right level,
Yeah.
even though it's coming out somewhere we don't know yet. But a lot of times when I walk up to a pond, that audio thing that you mentioned, hey, I can hear the waterfall, I can see the waterfall the way it's going, but like a lot of times I'll walk up to a pond and I'll look at it immediately and I'm just like soaking it all in, I'm taking it all in, and then I'll hear like it's just the autofill is just on full blast.
Yes.
Inside the skimmer, just trying to keep up, right? Just
Yes.
So I'm like, oh,
that's water levels down.
We have a problem with the water level, but visually, like from the kitchen, if you couldn't hear, like it looks okay. But it's interesting because I think that's a really important factor about having someone who doesn't see the pond every day take a look at it.
Yeah.
Because if you take a look at every day, at first it was just a drip, 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 right? You don't hear the audio from the drip, 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 right? But then it gets progressively a little bit stronger because as the water's leaking out of a low edge, it's getting wet, it's getting moist, it's sinking more, a little more water's coming out, a little more water's coming into the autofill, and so pretty soon it's like drip, 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 drip.
Yep.
And then you hear it, but it's happening so slow, you're just become used to that audio challenge.
Yes.
You just hear the little and you just think, oh, the waterfall sounds good, but it's your autofill.
Yeah.
And until it's like, gonna try to.
And without doing an inspection and figuring out what the issue is, I've run into that situation too. And it wasn't the water level that was down. The wing nut on that autofill rotted out, and now the autofill is just floating freely.
Yeah.
And it was just
That's happening
running.
in your house?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're an inspector. You're looking for that stuff
like,
all the time.
Is my water level low?
Yeah.
I'm like, look at my 3 points of rocks, and I'm like, no. Pull the lid. No wing nut there, and the float's just floating out in the air, and it's just filling. I'm like, oh, my autofill's broken.
Okay, so back to this. I think fish behavior is something that I would suggest that, someone who's a hobbyist that's going out to their pond every day. So, like, we want to look at fish behavior because, I mean, if you like your fish at all,
Yeah.
when they like to eat, when the weather changes, they don't eat as much. When it's warm, they eat like crazy. Like,
Yep.
You kind of notice that. When Fluffy comes up to get some fish food every day, and all of a sudden Fluffy don't want no food, and everyone else does, we have a problem. I mean, some people are just like, oh, Fluffy must not be hungry. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, why is he reacting that way?
Yeah.
Because usually, here's my footsteps,
Yeah.
and comes right up to the edge.
Isn't Fluffy a terrible name for a fish?
It's a pretty bad name. Means he has dropsy or something.
No. Some
Fluffy.
fungus going on or something. What other tidbits of value could you throw in there? See, a lot of people. I have a lot of clients that have like a C personality. They want to check off all the boxes, right? So I can give them a checklist. I'm like, hey, this is what you need to do your pond every week, every month, every quarter. Because I think one of our best emails that we've done in recent years was like a calendar checklist. So yeah, one of the calendar checklist is like, this is what we do in January. This is what we do in February, right? And some of these are just like simple things, but sometimes it's like, hey, we're getting the time changes in November. Make sure you test your transformer and check all your underwater lights. That way, when the time changes, you can enjoy your pond at nighttime, right? And so there's some things too about inspection that happen slowly. This is a really good one. For example, you got an underwater light system on the pond, and the lights come on every night, and then all of a sudden it's summertime. It doesn't get dark until 8:30, and you don't notice it as much. But when the lights come on in the fall, like 2 lights aren't working. Sometimes it's because an aquatic plant overtakes the light fixture.
Yeah.
And now the light fixture is completely engulfed and just being eaten by an aquatic plant. And then you're yanking the aquatic plant, you're cutting it with pruners, boom, there goes your light.
Yeah.
Right? Your light's just gone, right? But so like when we build a pond, we'll have like a diagram in the job folder, like, okay, they have 5 lights, so the inspector can go like, hey, this pond's supposed to have 5 lights, and they're generally like, 3 in the pond, 2 on the waterfall. We have that documentation in there.
Yeah.
So there's like something to fall back on. What's really cool is that if I do an inspection on a pond for someone who, I built a pond 15 years ago, let's say. God, I've been building ponds a long time. I'm getting old. I built a pond 15 years ago, and I have folders from 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And like the house has switched hands 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Right?
I've seen your folders, and you cross out the previous owner, write the new owner on it,
Yeah.
same address.
Yeah.
It's like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. And then I can open the folder and go all the way back to the first documentation from 15, 25 years ago, whatever, and go like, oh, we built this for the Johnsons in '01 or whatever, right? And then I can see that it changed hands 5 years later. I can see all the pumps that we've changed, all the documentations in all those folders. So it actually, it sets people back when I walk in and I go, hey, I built this pond 18 years ago. Here's the folder of everything this pond has ever had.
Yep.
The homeowners didn't even keep the records like that.
Yeah.
And so that's a real powerful tool that I have, like all the history of the pond.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that can be done for, people. Like we have the jobs we go to weekly or monthly. We have all that data.
Yeah.
We just save it all in that file. So like we're doing the journaling for the client, right?
Yep.
I don't even journal for my own pond, but I journal for other people's ponds.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy stuff. I'm trying to think if there's anything that we left out that might be like really important for people. I just want people to understand the value of it. It's and this extends like beyond my service area. Like I can't help people in Florida. At this point, I'm thinking about how to do that.
Yeah.
Like, can we do the virtual pond inspection, like photographs, FaceTime, whatever? I thought a lot about that, but clearly, I want everyone's pond to work smooth and be well. If it's in my service area, I want to do it, right? I'd love to have the opportunity to do that. But if it's outside my service area, let's find someone, man. Let's find someone that can do the job well for you. Right?
You potentially could do inspections in Florida. You just have to pin down the big ticket items and get some images or visual of those things. I need to see your type of skimmer you have, the connection point.
That's helpful.
Filtration. How high is your liner? What's your water level at? What type of filtration do you have? Do you have a UV on it? What are your fittings made out of? Is it that corrugated, terrible hose you get on Amazon?
Yeah.
Or is it that 2-inch flex hose?
Yeah. I think there's a way to do that. But that's not my point right now. The point for this podcast and the YouTube video is just to get people into that mindset. Like, let's get someone out here qualified to look at the pond, has some experience. I probably need to come up with like some questions to ask your inspector. I think that's important. I'm not coming up with a certification program or anything, but like at least to have some kind of like qualities that you're looking for in that. I've also thought about just like if you're I have a lot of peers in the business. I got like 5 or 6 really good contractor buddies in Florida. I can just pop them off. Like, where are you at? South Florida, North Florida? What?
Yeah.
I can just connect people. Iowa, like Nevada, all these places. I can send buddies. Call them up and refer them. But I don't want to necessarily like start in like, hey, I'm the inspector, and then I have all these inspectors across the country. I don't want to necessarily do that, but. Anyways, that's kind of the direction I'm thinking. I just want to make sure that the audience realizes how important that is. So, you got any final words on inspections you want to share with everyone?
Just remember that having an inspector come to your business or your pond doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong. It's about compliance through education and tipping the needle to make things better.
Yeah, we're not coming after you. We're not trying to get at you. We're not trying to take advantage of you. We just want your pond to be done well.
That's it.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for catching the podcast. We really enjoy getting feedback from you, so please jump into the comments and ask us questions and give suggestions on other podcasts that you'd like us to do. Maybe some people you want me to interview. I'd love to have more information like that. And it is important to us that you hit the notifications. You make sure you subscribe so you can catch all the podcasts. Whether you're doing it on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you do, just make sure you support us and follow us by giving us a rating and review. And please post those questions. And share the podcast with anyone that you think that can benefit, because ultimately it makes the world a better place, because we're getting better ponds in the ground, and we're becoming better versions of ourselves along the way. Thanks so much.